Hey there, guys. This is Cole. Welcome back to another movie review. We are continuing on the Halloween Horror Movie Review, Season 1, Episode 30. And today's movie I'm going to review is the third movie in the Evil Dead franchise, Army of Darkness from 1993, directed by Sam Raimi. Now, I covered the first two movies recently. I really like the first two movies. This one I do really like too, and I would say this is my second favorite movie of the franchise behind Evil Dead 2. And in my opinion, now, in my opinion, this was the last good Evil Dead movie because I'm not a big fan of the remake from 2013 or the new movie that came out a few years ago, Evil Dead Rise. I'm not a big fan of those movies, but when I eventually get to those reviews, I'll explain why. But this one, on the other hand, I really like. And I will say, this movie's got a really good cast. You got Bruce Campbell as Ash Williams. You got Richard Grove as Duke Henry Red. You got Marcus Gilbert as Lord Arthur. You got Patricia Tallman as a possessed witch. You got Embeth Davids as Sheila. You got Ted Raimi as Cowardly Warrior. You got Michael Earl Reed as Goldtooth, and Ian Abercrombie as Wiseman. So this movie's got a really stacked cast. But anyways, what is the plot to the 1993 movie Army of the Dead? And no, Army of Darkness, I meant to say. And now I know what you guys are gonna say. Oh, but Google says this movie came out in 1992. No, well, okay, this movie premiered at a film festival in 1992, but it did not have a wide theatrical release until February of 1993. But that's besides the point. So, what is the plot to the 1993 movie Army of Darkness? Well, the plot of the movie is as follows. Ash Williams is transported back to medieval days where he is captured by the dreadful Lord Arthur. Aided by the deadly chainsaw that has become his only friend, Ash is sent on a mission to recover the Book of the Dead, a powerful tome that gives its owner the power to summon an army of ghouls. So that's basically the plot synopsis to the movie. But anyways, how was this movie received? Well, Army of Darkness had its premiere at the Seeds Film Festival on October 9th, 1992, and was released in the United States on February 19th, 1993. When the movie was released in February of 1993, very much like the first two movies, it received positive reviews from critics and audiences and was a big box office hit. Now, what's unique about this movie is the different tone shift, and this is one of the very few rare times where trying something very unique and different worked in a movie series that started as a horror franchise. But what I really like about this movie is the tone. The first Evil Dead movie is a straight up horror film with some dark comedic aspects. Evil Dead 2 is a horror comedy, and this movie, Evil Dead, is a horror movie, the first one. The second one is a horror comedy, and this one is full out slapstick comedy, which sounds like it could have been a disaster, but it actually does work with this movie. And like I said, this is a great movie, and it's the second best movie in the Evil Dead franchise behind Evil Dead 2. But yeah, as for my reaction of the movie, Army of Darkness is a great movie, and in my opinion, like I said, this was the last good Evil Dead movie, as I did not like the Evil Dead 2013 remake or Evil Dead Rise. Now, there was a TV show where the star of the movies, Bruce Campbell, did return, a TV show that lasted from 2015 to 2018 called Ash vs. Evil Dead. The show ran for about 3 seasons. I only saw the first season of the TV show, but the TV show was rather good. But anyways, enough with the long intro. Let's get into the review. The movie starts off right where Evil Dead 2 ended, with Ash Williams stuck back in time during the medieval ages. Ash Williams is being held prisoner, and Ash Williams narrates at the beginning of the movie, My name is Ash, and I'm a slave. Close as I can figure it, the year is 1300 AD, and I'm being dragged to my death. It wasn't always like this. I had a real life once, a job. The movie then cuts to a flashback of the past where we see Ash Williams working in a grocery store. Ash Williams then says, "Shop smart, shop smart," and then Ash narrates, "I had a wonderful girlfriend, Linda. Together, we drove to a small cabin in the mountains," basically giving the backstory of what happened in the first two movies. It seemed as an archaeologist had come to this remote cabin to translate and study his later find, Necronomicon Ex Mortis, the Book of the Dead. Bound in human flesh and inked in blood, the ancient Sumerian text contains bizarre burial grounds and demon resurrection passages. It was never meant for the world of the living. A book awoke something dark in the woods. It took Linda, and then it came for me. It got into my head and went so bad I had to cut it off at the wrist, but that didn't stop. It came back big time. We then cut to Ash, and keep in mind, like I said, the first two Evil Dead movies were super gory horror movies, but this movie is not very bloody. I mean, minus the exception of one scene, compared to the first two Evil Dead movies, this movie is very tame. And it's not really a horror movie. This one is more of a slapstick comedy. Pretty much 95% of this movie is a slapstick comedy, and I think that the humor works really well in the movie. But anyways, let's get back to the review. We then cut to Ash Williams on the ground, who gets up, and Lord Arthur calls to the wise man, who goes up to Ash, after Ash tells Arthur that he doesn't know how he got here or where he's at. And then the wise man says to Arthur, "My lord, I believe he's the one written in the Necronomicon, he who has prophesied all from heavens, deliver us from the terrors of the Deadites." And then Lord Arthur then says, "What of who likely? He's one of Henry's men." And Lord Arthur basically demands his men to get rid of Ash, but Ash loses his chainsaw, which was attached to his arm, and now remember how in Evil Dead 2, Ash Williams lost his hand, and he replaced it with a chainsaw? Well, he basically loses his chainsaw early on in the movie. So the wise man picks it up off the ground, curious at what it is. We then cut to Ash Williams, whose one arm and head are chained up in a wooden pallet you stick your head and arms into. That I don't know the technical term of the name, but it was basically basically it's what people used on prisoners back in the 1300s and stuff like that, where both of people's I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, but it's like those wooden things where you close it on a person and but there's enough room for their head and their two wrists to be in there. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah, Ash has one of those around him. And Ash Williams is being marched off to the castle by, the guards. Ash Williams then meets Henry the Red, which tells Ash he's the lord of the Northland and its people. And this part I love right here. This part is funny. Ash Williams then says, and what makes this scene work is that Bruce Campbell gives a great performance as the lead character, Ash Williams, and his lines of dialogue are really funny in the movie. And, I love the part when Ash Williams says, "Well, hello, Fancy Pass. Well, hello, Fancy Pants. I have news for you, pal. You ain't leaving, but two things right now. Jack and SHIT." And Jack left town. I love that scene. I think that scene's absolutely hilarious. Another thing I really dig about this movie, I also really dig this movie's version of King Arthur. I thought that the actor who played him did a really good job in this movie, and I would say that Marcus Gilbert, he probably is my favorite on-screen version of King Arthur that we've had yet. And so not long after that, there's a whole scene where early on in the movie, a pit is open that the townspeople want. Basically, a pit is opened up where basically like they use a reel and like it's basically a hole you throw people in, but basically a bunch of people are cheering and they want Ash Williams and other people thrown into the pit, and Tom gets thrown down. And now like I said, this is a pretty tame movie, and like this is honestly the only scene of the movie that's very bloody. Like okay, like mine, and I will say minus the exception of this one scene, this movie's not that bloody. But basically, a pit is opened up and, blood sprays out of it, which, like I said, that's really the only bloody scene in the movie. Because, like I said, the first two Evil Dead movies, they were more horror movies with some comedic aspects, but this whole movie, on the other hand, is a full-out slapstick comedy, and it's very tame. But in my opinion, it works because of the great characters and story. But let's get back to the review. But then anyways, the main character, Ash Williams, he is thrown into the pit and he sees water and fog, basically around him. Ash Williams then gets beaten up by a deadite with everyone watching and cheering. Basically, the townspeople think that Ash Williams did something that he didn't do, and Ash tried telling Lord Arthur that you got the wrong guy, but he wouldn't listen to him, and Lord Arthur is using a crank, and as this happens, Ash Williams sees a spiked wall slowly moving towards him. While Ash is fighting the possessed ones, the wise man says, "Strange one," and then he throws Ash his chainsaw, which he attaches to his arm, and he defeats the possessed woman deadite. And then Ash Williams cuts off the hand of a different deadite, and it lands on a guy's face, and everyone's laughing. Like, just the way that scene was done, I thought that scene was funny. And Ash Williams is able to tie his belt to a chain which pulls him out of the hole. And now we get to one of my favorite parts of the movie. I love the whole part when Ash Williams comes out the hole and he says to Lord Arthur, like, this is a funny scene, because this was in a time when, shoelaces were not a thing. But I love the part when Ash Williams says to Lord Arthur, your shoelaces are untied. And, and King Arthur looks down, and then Ash Williams punches him in the face and he falls on the ground. I thought that scene was funny. And then, of course, there's the whole scene where Ash Williams says, "All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up. See this?" And then Ash Williams is holding a shotgun, and then he basically yells at the top of my lungs, "This is my boomstick," basically freaking out all the townspeople. I thought that scene was funny. Ash Williams says he wants to get back home. However, the wise man informs Ash Williams that only the Necronomicon has the power to send Ash back home, that there are certain passages that can send Ash back home, and that only Ash, the promised one, can request for it. And then Ash Williams says, I don't want your bag, I don't want your BS, just send me back to my own time today." And then there's a possessed witch who's, like I said, who is in the movie. There's a possessed witch that says, "You shall die, you shall never take the Necronomicon." Then the possessed witch fakes being passed out. Lord Arthur is about to touch the possessed witch, but Ash stops him and he says, "Do not do it. It is a trick. Get an axe." Then the witch gets up and starts attacking everyone, and everyone starts fighting the witch. Then, of course, there's the whole scene where Ash Williams uses his shotgun and says, "You she bitch, let's go." And then Ash Williams, without looking, shoots the witch dead and down. And then the wise man says, "It's the Necronomicon. It's the Necronomicon. Gets into the hands of the deadites." He says, if the Necronomicon gets into the hands of the deadites, all of mankind will be consumed by this evil. Ash Williams then gets people to build him a metal arm that he can crush metal with. And then of course there's the whole scene where Ash Williams uses the metal arm to basically crush a metal wine cup and says groovy. I mean, that's a well-remembered part of the movie. Ash Williams and then throughout the course of the movie, Ash Williams, he starts to fall in love with Selena, one of the townspeople of Arthur's Land. And then, and then Ash Williams says, give me some sugar, baby. And then Sheila kisses Ash. And then Ash Williams and some of Arthur's men ride off with horses. But before Ash can continue, the wise man tells him to stop, that this trail will lead Ash to an unholy place, a ceremony. It'll lead him to an unholy place, a cemetery. There, the Necronomicon waits. The wise man says, once you have the book, you must say the words, Klaatu Durata Nictu. And then Ash says, and then he basically asks Ash, do you have the words memorized? He's like, yeah, I have the words memorized. And then Ash says, let's get this straight. If I get that book, you send me back. After that, I'm history. And then, Ash goes on the path, and it causes the horse that Ash is on to get scared as the unseen evil force is coming for them. Ash Williams and his horse are running away, but Ash hits a branch by accident and slides down a hill away from his horse. Then into an empty house. Then after some banging on the door, everything goes quiet. It is now dark outside. Ash Williams accidentally breaks a mirror which shatters, and some of the broken pieces have Ash's reflection in them. And as Ash Williams walks away, then the small reflections of Ash come out of the mirror, at least 6 small versions of Ash, 3 of which poke Ash in the butt with like a fork. Like, that scene was hilarious with how it was executed. Ash Williams then grabs a small fork and he throws it, stabbing a mini version of himself. But like I said, this movie is very tame, so there's no blood in this scene. Then the 5 others trip Ash with a broom, and then, not long after that, this right here leads to one of my favorite scenes of the movie, where Ash Williams, he is loudly singing London Bridge is falling down, and stomping on the ground, chasing after one of the mini clones of himself. Then the one that falls over grabs a fork and pokes him in the nail with a in the shoe with a nail. Like, that scene was funny with how it was executed. Then Ash Williams passes out and he wakes up tied up with the mini clones. I love the scene when a mini clone goes inside Ash's mouth and Ash says, "Okay, little fella, how about some hot chocolate, huh?" And then he pours a pot of it down his throat to burn the mini clone inside him. Like, that was funny. Then, after Ash Williams hears the mini clone, supposedly die inside him, he says, How do you like the taste of that, huh?" And again, that scene was funny due to its line delivery and the execution of a slapstick comedy. Ash Williams then grows a second head, and the second head is outside. The second head slaps Ash with his own hand, and then Ash pokes the eye of the second head. Again, very funny scene, very Three Stooges-esque type of humor, and very much in the same type of comedy that the Jim Carrey movie The Mask was. The second head then separates from Ash's body, forming yet another version of himself he must fight, which Ash Williams does manage to defeat. Ash Williams then says, "Good, bad, I'm the man with the gun." And I love the part when Ash Williams buries the head of the evil clone, but before then, the head of like the evil clone says to Ash, "You shall never retrieve the Necronomicon. You'll die in the graveyard before you get it." And then Ash Williams says, "Hey, what's that you got in your face?" And then the evil head looks away, and then Ash throws dirt on the evil head's face. I thought that scene was funny. And then Ash Williams is at a stone table that has 3 books on them. 3 books on them that all look similar, so Ash is not sure what to do. Ash Williams opens one of the books, and and the book basically sucks him inside, but Ash pulls himself out and his face stretches down in like a comedic way. Then Ash Williams gets out of it and, straightens out his face. And then he says, wrong book. And one of the books even bites his fingers. But the whole scene where Ash Williams is trying to remember the words and find the right book is a rather funny scene. And Ash Williams, of course, he gets the words wrong, and he accidentally, because he got the words wrong, it triggered an explosion affecting the townspeople, and skeletons of the grave grab Ash in a comedic way. Ash Williams escapes and he says, I am through being their garbage boy. I did my part, now I want it back. Ash Williams then returns to the castle. And Ash tells Wiseman, I said the words, maybe not every exact syllable, but I basically said what was written. The wise man then says, you have doomed us all. When you spoke those words, the army of the dead awoke. And then Lord Arthur says to Ash, the wise men will send you back to your time. But everyone now hates Ash and walks away. And Lord Arthur says, the wise man was a fool to trust you. But Sheila is on Ash's side, and Sheila has faith that Ash can do this. But there's a whole battle near the end of the movie where a flying monster picks up Sheila, and Ash must rescue Sheila. Ash Williams then leads King Arthur's land, and they all plan to fight the army of the dead. The whole finale where Ash and the knights are fighting the army of the dead is rather entertaining, and basically, near the end of the movie, after the battle, Sheila, who was turned into a monster, turns back into a human, reunites with Ash, and then Ash rides off on a horse and is sent back home from the Necronomicon. Ash Williams is then in the store with a woman by the name of Jenny. He's in the store with his co-worker Jenny, and he must fight the possessed witch lady, or the Deadite, at the end of the movie. And the possessed lady says, who are you? And then Ash says, my name is Ash, house words. The possessed lady then says, I'll swallow your soul. And then Ash says, come and get some. And he defeats the evil possessed person, and the movie ends with Ash Williams saying, hail to the king, baby. Then he kisses his co-worker Jenny, who he just saved, and the movie's over. So yeah, at the end of the day, Army of Darkness is a great movie. It's my second favorite movie of the Evil Dead franchise, and in my opinion, at least in terms of the movies, this was the last good Evil Dead movie, and I'm going to give Army of Darkness a 9 out of 10. So yeah, next up, unfortunately, I'm going to be covering the Evil Dead remake, which I'm not a fan of, but you'll find out why when we get to that. But until then, guys, we'll catch you later. Bye-bye now.